So in the previous video, um, I have it numbered 0001. I talk a little bit about my retail background. And at the end of that video, I said that I would talk a little bit about how I turned my business plan into action. So I don't have a formal background in business. I'm not a college graduate. I barely have a good high school education. So I don't consider myself an academic or someone who follows that academic line of thinking. I don't necessarily follow a structured thinking the way that a person who has an expertise in something they came out of school with. I'm just judging because I don't really actually know what education I would have got in school on business that I didn't get educated on the street on. So when I was exiting my father's business in 2008, 2009, I was coming up on 40 years old. I was 39, 40 years old, and things were more serious for me because I had a young daughter and I wasn't working for myself anymore. I had to make sure that I brought food to the table, so I had to definitely make sure I was more responsible for my finances than ever before. It was a big step for me to step away from my father's business because I was actually making a decent living with him. And I really do think that I had come to a point where I really understood his business and I could have continued on doing what I was doing with him. I was just quite honestly very bored by his business and the manner by which we produced sales in that business, being pushy salesmen from New York, wasn't something that I was ever comfortable with, even though I think I developed the ability to be good at it. In the back of my mind, I really didn't like what I was doing. I also don't like the constricted feeling of being in a quiet indoor place with halogen lighting and poor air circulation, and you're just sitting around all day. You're either just looking at your computer, trying to get some projects done, but really doing nothing with your time, waiting for a customer to walk in. It was just a really boring business. If I was leaving at 5:30, at 5:25, I had everything ready and packed so neatly so that at 5:29 and 30 seconds, I was already halfway out the door. So the passion wasn't there. I knew that I had to sit down and write a business plan. And in 2009, I had to read a really basic book on what a business plan was. I wouldn't say that in 2009 there was a lot of opportunities on YouTube to learn things. It was really different back then. I wouldn't say there was as many opportunities for people to teach you how to create, scalable businesses the way that you can learn online exists. I didn't really know how to find a mentor, somebody that can teach me to do this. And so I was really kind of confused by what a business plan was supposed to really look like. What I understood was that had I been looking for investors' money, that what I really would be doing then is I would be creating a business deck that had some elements of a business plan in it, but it was really polished. If it's a deck to attract investors, it's really polished where each category of that deck is 60-second sound bites that someone can look at flying by really fast and figure out whether or not they were excited by that particular category or that particular business. And so at that time, I wasn't really looking for investors, so I didn't really need anything like that. What I really needed was I needed a way to structure my ideas and see what I had to do for that business to make it work. And so before I had identified a location, which was the first location was on East First Street. As I said, it was about 280 to 300 square usable ground square footage. Before I had identified that location, what I did was I created a square box in my computer in a CAD-like software that I was familiar with, and I had designed a layout that I thought would be optimum for this type of business. And the square footage in my layout was about 900 square feet. And what I had done was I had taught myself through this business plan what the operation was going to look like. Everything down from where staff would take off their coats and change their shoes and put their stuff in a locker room, to where they would go to the bathroom, wash their hands, have lunch breaks, where they were going to make juice or make a soup, where we would store it, how we would store it, where we would store the bottles, where we would put the caps, where we would make the labels. I'd really looked at my competitor's business so thoroughly that I had made lists of all these things that I knew had to be designed into any floor plan that I was doing. And I think that it was that level of attention to detail that I had a natural capability for. And that's not something that I think that you get an education in school for. I just think I was very meticulous in the 2 or 3 businesses that I was involved in my life. I'm definitely a Capricorn, if there is such a thing, and I love to organize. But I'm also, metaphorically speaking, I always use comparisons to what we do as operators in food and beverage to what a fishing boat captain has to contend with to go out there and get fish. And in the fishing boat captain metaphor, what I like about it is that if the captain makes mistakes, people die, the ship sinks. And so the rules that we follow on a fishing boat, they're very black and white, and there's no argument why those rules are followed, whether it's how we in food and beverage, how we wash our produce, how we train our staff, how we correct the staff when they're not doing what was expected, what the finance department was doing, what the marketing department is doing. Everyone is aboard a ship, and everyone has a responsibility. Everyone is a vital member. They're all sailors, and the ship really is the business. And that's still how I think about the retail business. I know that it's not a very feminine metaphor, and so for some people it might not be attractive, but for me, that's how I think about the kitchen. It's how I think about the structure of business today. I see it as the same metaphors that you would find in a typical military environment, aboard a naval battleship. And so if I have that mindset, I believe that I can be a very good operator in any business. That when I get into that business, I intend to operate it efficiently, precisely, effectively, and by the numbers for all the departments. And so my business plan for Juice Press in 2010 could not have been any less accurate. It was completely off base. All my projections were wrong. My monthly expenses were completely off base. The things that I needed for that business were never accounted for in the business plan. The business plan was a discipline for me to figure out whether or not I really wanted to do the business, whether or not I understood the business. And the truth is, right up into the day before I signed the lease for the East First Street store, I had my doubts. I was still quite scared. There were elements that I just didn't know that I had any skill sets for. And so the day I took the lease for that store, I was scared shitless, to be quite honest, and my automatic reaction from being a skydiver was when I felt that something was going wrong, I just concentrated more and put more effort and more attention to that thing, and I had to make it work. Just like being in skydiving, you got to get your parachute open, it's got to fly straight, and you got to land 100% of the times. I have that mentality from 2,300 skydives and being in the skydiving industry for over a decade. It was good conditioning for my mind. When I started building the East First Street store, I discovered for myself after about 2 months that I was going to be good at the business because I was very enthusiastic about all of the details of the business. I was very interested in a 3-compartment sink and how you hook it up, and having a air gap between the sink drain and the actual connection of the S-trap that goes into your main waste system. That kind of stuff really interested me because it was mechanical in nature, and I always liked mechanical things. I was fascinated by logistics and how to figure out where to start a production process and get it to completion all the way to the very end. And so this business had the kind of excitement and entertainment in it that I was missing in my family business. And there was enough volume and there was enough potential for it to be a lot more lucrative for me than the skydiving business, which the skydiving business obviously was extremely limited. And maybe I'll find the time to go back and talk about that business, because there was some really great experiences in the skydiving retail business that I had during my my 30s and my early 40s. So in the meantime, I was building Juice Press, and we got really lucky with Juice Press, I must say, that it was all of the elements that made Juice Press great were not contrived in a boardroom. They were not worked out meticulously between branding teams and marketing teams, public relations teams, and innovation teams, and finance teams, and construction teams. All the things that worked at Juice Press were figured out on my laptop. They were figured out between me and my early partners, and lots of arguments, lots of headbutting. They were figured out by ideas that I had in my head that, looking back, I can see why everyone thought that those ideas were wrong. And in some ways, a lot of those ideas were actually wrong, and so I probably would never do them that way twice. But I could see that it helped Juice Press get lift. For example, in a retail food and beverage business, one would say that the menu has to be extremely simple. The ingredients have to have cross-utilization, meaning if I have the need for ginger, I can't just use it in one product, because it wouldn't make sense if there wasn't a way to cross-utilize it in another product. So when you design a menu, you're obviously considering cross-utilization of your ingredients so that you have a kitchen that is easier to order for and manage, and you'll have less waste and perhaps even less storage needs, less washing needs, less labor. And even on the marketing side, if you have less ingredients, it makes it easier for you to communicate to your customer what it is that you're actually doing. So every business model would say that our first Juice Press menu was so overly complicated that it had to sink to the bottom of the ocean. And in mostly everyone's case, I would say that it did. The reason why it worked for me was because I was willing to work harder than anyone else to make it work. And my belief wasn't that I was just being stubborn and wanted to have a complicated menu, was I really believed that to get a mechanical advantage over my competitor, I had to have an overall better offering than they did. If I wanted to get away from the labor of having a rotary juice machine, and I was just going to concentrate on cold pressed juice from a bottle in a time where that wasn't really in style, I had to have enough of a flavor selection. I had to have enough formulas in individual bottles that if a person came into the store, there would be no way in the world they couldn't find something that they liked. So after about 5 or 6 months of Juice Press being open, I remember having at least 40 different bottled juice formulas that we had to make every single day and put in the refrigerator. And man, did that take labor, and man, was that complicated. Luckily, we were doing that for one store, and so it was manageable, and it did cause excitement, and it did get people talking, because the other thing that was really unique was that we came up with really ridiculous names like Dr. Green Juice, Ginger Fireball, Hawaiian Healer, The Guru, Spicy Citrus, Drink Your Salad. These were all names that, for one reason or another, New Yorkers seemed to like the brands, the sub-brands that lived under the Juice Press roof. people enjoyed coming to the store and asking for the smoothie, the Hawaiian healer, or going into the refrigerator and seeing the name Ginger Fireball. People knew what that product was and they knew what to expect, and it was very clear and it was very polarizing, because when it said Ginger Fireball, there was a lot of ginger in it, and man, was that spicy. And that was not the common thing in that time. If I remember correctly, my competitor had a ginger-based drink. It was like a cold killer or something like that. There was some ginger and cayenne in it, but it really wasn't that spicy. And I think he put some apple or maybe cut it with maple or honey to take off some of the spicy edge. Here we came along in 2010, 2011, and we had straight ginger shots, 2-ounce ginger shots, 3-ounce ginger shots that would literally just set your head on fire. And for lack of a better word, I would say placebo. The placebo effect that something as powerful and polarizing as ginger could have on a person's mind, if you attach the word cold fighter or anti-inflammatory, when you feel that in your system, the fire of that much ginger, and the people who are serving it really believe it, then the customer really believes it. And if the customer believes it, then there has to be some kind of positive impact on their chemistry. And so people felt better consuming our products. And they talked about it. And they spread the word for us. We had no organization in marketing whatsoever. We had this tiny store on East First Street back in 2010. There weren't many retail stores in the area that were worth visiting other than Juice Press. There were plenty of rats running around in certain parts of that street. I wouldn't say that this was one of the more exclusive, wealthy neighborhoods of New York, but it was definitely a destination place. And we managed in the first year and a half to really capitalize on the juice cleanse craze and emerge as a popular brand in New York that was doing something very different. And so the thing that I did well was just take on heaps of responsibility and not have any boundaries with my personal life. The stores were open from the earliest possible hour that you could open, and we closed at the latest possible hour. We had the most possible offerings you could have on a very densely packed menu in a very tightly packed store with probably 3 seats in the entire place to serve guests. So it definitely was not a light casual sit down dining place. It was certainly grab and go. The grab and go look of that store, I also think, made it very concise for customers. When you came into that store, you knew exactly what you were going to do. You were going to look at the menu, you were going to go into the refrigerator, you were going to grab something, you were going to pay and check out really fast. I spared no expense to making sure that there was always good labor there to check people out quickly. Speed of service was always something in my mind. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting about Juice Press was how organized our product was. For the number of SKUs that we had, I think we did a very good job in a small space of making the offering really easy to see what we had and to like everything. And so people went crazy for the stuff that we were serving at Juice Press. We had created something called raw oatmeal before it was ever a thing. It was not just overnight oats. We were taking steel cut oatmeal, soaking it in water in a container in a refrigerator overnight, draining it, washing them out. The soaking made them softer so they're edible. You don't have to cook it. And then we would mix in a blended cashew nut milk, which was just basically cashews and water and perhaps some vanilla, some sea salt, maybe a tiny bit of sweetener, but mostly not. And mixing that in, blending it in, and then setting it in the refrigerator and letting the cold temperature set it into kind of a pudding. And it was unbelievable. And man, was it fresh and good. And people would come from miles to buy that product. And it was not a durable product. It didn't last for a long time in the refrigerator because of the cashew nut milk. And places all over the place tried to replicate the formula. And I mean, we had the ingredients right on the label, and people would tell me all the time, I tried to copy it at home, it came out horrible. The reason it came out amazing in Juice Press was because we were just doing it wrong. You know, we didn't really have a good system that normal people would follow on how you would mix and blend things together. And so it was our absence of the knowledge of how to create these things that made foolish methods of production actually the reason why we were successful at Juice Press. So in the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the chaos that I dealt with in the early days at Juice Press, because I think that when you're an entrepreneur, whether you have 5,000 stores and gosh, you know far more than me, and your board is much bigger than mine ever was, and you know your investor decks and all these things like that we talk about. You know, look, I don't care how big of a retail chain a person has. There's retail basics. You know, somebody with one store could know them, and you could see all over the country. You can see a one-store operator who is an absolute genius, and in his or her genius, perhaps what they decided was they weren't going to expand anymore because they didn't want to ruin their product. And you know, back in the old days when money was a very important thing in my mind in running a business, which by the way, making money is still important to me, is the most important thing to me. And certainly I won't let the need to make money dictate how I create a business. I want to create a business first in my mind and then work out the business model from that and not the reverse. So the point of what I was saying is that I could now respect the single unit retail brick and mortar owner who decides that they want to stay small and they want to be great. And if they have a business that's profitable, where their customer is happy, they're absolute geniuses and they deserve tremendous credit. And I wouldn't say that just because a large organization has $10 million to start up a retail business and they have an incredible marketing team and the finances are all set up and we have HR books already laid out and we have a legal team and we have all these elements, it's still 10,000 times harder to get to one store that the consumer responds to well, that is a brand worth studying and copying. So Juice Press at the 3-store level was a great brand like that, where if you looked at it and you saw what we had going on downtown and the unit that we had, which was a franchise and the only franchise that Juice Press ever had, which I sold to my father, David, who, when he left the art business and got to really see what I was doing at Juice Press, fell in love with it, begged me practically to get involved in it. I didn't want him involved on a company level, but we saw that having one single store was doable. And it was my dad's store on 62nd Street, which really catapulted the brand into the airwaves of New Yorkers because of its location. It was just 100 times better than the first location. It was a store that was 4 times larger. And, you know, just having that number of people flowing through on 62nd Street every day really gave us a chance to test the nature of the business model. And what I feel today is that if you are looking to create a chain in the food and beverage business, as we say cliche in our industry, that freshness is the enemy of profits. The type of products that I want to create are products that I myself want to consume. And I don't want to serve anything to the public that I wouldn't give to my children, anything I wouldn't put in my own body. And so I'm in a dilemma, which is that my products are not mainstream. My products are for a small niche market. And the mistake that I made with Juice Press, I feel, was that I was too ambitious and wanted to expand it into something that I don't think is at this time necessarily feasible on a chain level. I can't see how it would work on a franchise level either. I actually think it would do a lot worse as a franchise. So hopefully I'll have a chance to talk about my ideas of franchise versus chain later on as it's relevant. But for now, I'll talk in the next video about some of the chaos that I had in those early years. Thank you.